let's talk about the Pope. So there is this story that made the news this week that actually got me thinking. It made me ask the question, what was the Catholic Church doing during the Holocaust? And I felt really bad asking myself that question because I don't think I've ever in my life given that much thought to that question. I don't think it came up when I learned about this stuff in school. I don't think in the years since the role of the Catholic Church ever played much of a role in my understanding of World War II and the Holocaust. Like, I don't know who the Pope was during that time. I don't know what the Catholic Church said. I just assumed that I'm sure there were good Catholics trying to do the right thing and help people as much as they could. I'm sure there were many Catholics who were very much on the other side because that's true of any large institution. I just didn't know. Um, but a couple things that I have since learned. The Vatican was officially neutral during World War II. I want to be clear, not the Holocaust, but they were neutral during World War II because they didn't want to take sides, which is a thought we have heard many times in subsequent wars as well. And it never ages well when when there's clearly one side that's on the moral high ground, that has the moral high ground, and like the other side has a dictator that's invading places and killing people. You shouldn't have to be neutral. Anyway, the Vatican was neutral during World War II. But because of the invasion of Poland, which is highly Catholic, and other Catholic majority nations, Pope Pius XII, who was the Pope during all of World War II, pretty much, Pope Pius XII, he had condemned anti Semitism. And that's a good thing. And the church did assist people who were being persecuted by the Nazis. But by and large, the historical take on Pope Pius XII is that he could have done more. The church could have done more to help people during that time. There's been a play written about that. It's called The Deputy, a Christian Tragedy, all about Pius XII's supposed inaction during World War II. There was a 2008 book called Hitler's Pope about Pope Pius XII, which is really not the nickname you want for yourself in history. That probably doesn't help his image. But the point is, people have been saying this for many years now. Like, there's been art dedicated to exploring what the Catholic Church and its leader did not do during that time. And when the Pope did speak out at the time, it was always in general terms, like violence is bad. But he didn't single out Hitler. He didn't single out the Third Reich. He did not explicitly talk about how Jews were being targeted. And one thing that you could say in the Pope's defense is that maybe, like a lot of people, he didn't realize just what was happening during the Holocaust. Because in 1942, a lot of the details about what was happening in the death camps, it wasn't well understood by a lot of people. Like, yeah, people knew what was going on, but the details were scarce. You could say that about the war in Ukraine right now. Like, what's Russia doing in Ukraine? What atrocities, what war crimes are happening right now? If you follow the news, you might have heard some of them. But by and large, I don't think people really have a good idea of just how brutal and horrific that stuff is. And when you talk about the Holocaust, it's so much more, right? And so here's why this is news this week. I want to share this with you. This is the headline in the New York Times and then posted by other places. A letter found in Vatican archives confirms that the church was told about the death camps. Basically, the story here is that Pope Pius XII history can no longer say he didn't know enough about what was happening to speak out forcefully. No, he did know what was happening at a time when he could have said something. And let me summarize this article for you. A couple things you should know is it usually the Vatican doesn't unseal a pope's archives for like 70 years after their death. They keep that stuff in a lockbox. And for Pope Pius XII, we have another 10 years to go before his shit is unsealed. But Pope Francis did say, you know what, we're going to do it early. We're going to do it now because the church is not afraid of history. So he said, I'm going to give historians and archivists access to Pope Pius XII's documents so they can study it and figure this stuff out. And you know what? Whatever it says, that's fine. That's what we got to live with. So good on him. That's what he should have done. maybe he could have done it sooner, whatever, he did it now. And one of those archivists, the guy who works for the Vatican, but I think he's kind of an independent guy contracted by the Vatican. His name is Giovanni Coco. He's been studying the letters of Pope Pius XII ever since they were unsealed. And what he found was a letter from a German priest who was part of the resistance against Nazis. He was working in Germany as a priest, but he was conveying information to the outside world. And he told the Pope's secretary exactly what was going on. And because this priest was so trusted, had such a good reputation, there's a really good chance, according to the archivist, that the Pope saw that letter. And according to the letter, according to the secretary, this letter is dated December 14th, 1942, and he talks about the state of persecution of the church in Germany, but it includes an appendix with the number of priests imprisoned in one concentration camp. Let me see if I can. There we go. Check that out. The letter includes. See if you could see this here. There we go. The letter includes an appendix with the number of priests imprisoned at one concentration camp near Munich. He mentions the Auschwitz death camp in a reference to another. And he told of the thousands of Polish people and Jews being murdered by the Nazis at another death camp. Like, he's laying it out there. The letter actually said 6,000 people a day are being murdered in furnaces in one of the death camps specifically. And in fact, if you look, this is that death camp's website. If you could see this, it says, it's a little hard to see because of the thing there, but look at the top line there. Between March and December of 1942, about 450,000 people were murdered there, most of whom were Polish Jews, as well as the Jewish deportees from other countries. So that's what the letter said. That's what the Pope supposedly knew about. So if the Pope knew about those atrocities, like, why didn't he say more? And there's a few reasons for that, according to the archivist. Coco said the Pope might have been worried about what could happen to Catholics in Poland, in Eastern Europe, everywhere where Nazis were in control. Like, the fear is, if you speak out in defense of Jews, are they going to retaliate? Is Hitler going to retaliate against Catholics in these other places? Maybe you could say, okay, legitimate worry. Maybe he was worried Catholics would be persecuted in the same way. But that would still mean that instead of using his platform to still forcefully condemn Nazis and defend Jewish people, he chose silence so that his own people would not have attention drawn to them, which, again, in historical hindsight, that seems like the coward's way out. Like, if the guy running the Catholic Church doesn't have the moral guts to speak out against atrocities, what are we supposed to expect of you? So that's one reason. He also might have feared that if he condemns the Nazis, then a lot of the Germany affiliated nations will break with the Catholic Church, alienating Catholics and potential Catholics in those countries. So basically, that would suggest a self-serving Pope prioritize the church's membership numbers over the people who were being murdered by the Nazis. It is also possible the Pope thought he could negotiate with Hitler, as if diplomacy was going to stop a dictator. Like, I don't know which of those scenarios puts the Pope in a good light here, because any of them, it shows an act of cowardice and historically awful injustice. Another theory has been that the Pope could not verify what he was hearing, so he didn't want to jump the gun. But another scholar, I think quoted in that New York Times piece, said the letter that he got from this one priest in Germany, that's not the only one he got. Other people were relaying the realities on the ground to the Pope at the time. So, like, this letter should have carried more weight, but it's not like it was the only thing he was working off of. And one reason all this matters, not just to correct the historical record and make sure we know the Catholic Church has always taken the wrong moral side on a lot of big issues, but also the Catholic Church has moved to make Pope Pius XII a saint. There are 4 steps he needs to overcome. He's officially gone through 2 of them. And to his credit, Pope Francis has he's pushed pause on the sainthood button for Pope Pius until historians have a chance to more thoroughly examine all these unsealed records. But at this point, like, what happens if he does become a saint? What does that tell you about the Catholic Church? They made Mother Teresa a saint, and she was a moral monster too, for a bunch of reasons. So, like, what is it if these people can become saints, if Mother Teresa is a saint, if Pope Pius XII becomes a saint, what the hell do you have to do to not become one? Because according to these historical documents, Pope Pius XII took the coward's way out when it came to speaking out against Nazis. And all of this should bring into question the church's supposed virtue. Why would anyone in their right mind want to belong to an institution that is just repeatedly on the wrong side of all these simple moral questions? These are not like 50-50 questions. These are like, oh yeah, there's a right side and a wrong side, and it's not hard to figure out which is which. I mean, history, whether you're looking at the sex abuse scandals, the Crusades, Inquisition, whatever, history almost never shines a positive light on the Catholic Church because they have been against science, against sex, against marginalized people, against transparency. They wage wars. They harbor abusive priests. They've resisted giving victims justice. They argue against look back windows that would eliminate statute of limitations so victims could get justice. And now, on top of all that, we have a pope who may have looked the other way during World War II because, membership might go down, maybe. How could anyone still be Catholic when all of this is what the church represents? I don't care what they're telling you in your church. I don't care if you like your priest. This is the institution you're giving money to, that you're trying to send your kids to their schools. Like, the church has no business pretending it has any moral authority. Oh, Jesus. What questions and concerns are we discussing here? Was there any case for the argument that the Third Reich would have targeted Catholics if the Vatican had spoken up? I don't know. I don't know the historical side of this. There's just the theory that if these people are going after everybody, it seems, and maybe there are some people out there that didn't know they were specifically targeting a certain group of people at the exclusion of others. Like, maybe they were worried, like, wow, if Hitler like wins the war, maybe we want to be on his side, maybe. Like, I don't know what they were thinking, but I guess, knowing, being very ignorant on this subject, I guess it's possible that people worried Hitler might go after Catholics once he was done with other people. I mean, there are plenty of people right now who are not speaking out against Putin, who are not saying bad things about him, who are not seemingly worried if he takes over more land. And you have to wonder what their motivations are for that too. Do they not know enough? Or do they just want to stay on his good side just in case? I don't know. But it's very troubling. It was common knowledge what happened. People just didn't care. I have to believe I have to believe that's true. Like, how do you not know about these atrocities? People were relaying it at the time. There were people speaking out about it at the time. I guess my question is, the people who have the biggest pulpits, metaphorically speaking, how much were they speaking out against it? How much did people care about it? Because again, if you just look at today, there are plenty of horrible things happening. Some people have platforms and speak out honorably in favor or against these various issues, but a lot of people either spread misinformation, try to spread disinformation, don't talk about it at all, try to distract you. And I'm kind of curious how many of them either didn't care, like you said, or just they didn't think it was as big of an issue as it really was. They were ignorant, but not intentionally. So they were just being fed bad information. I don't know the answer. This is where my lack of history knowledge comes into play there. Catholics keeping quiet about atrocities? The hell, you say? I know. Never happens today, except for every other story I'm going to talk about today. It's a common thing.